Hi, everybody. Good to see Family of Choice here tonight at our Big Book Club. And before we get going tonight, we're going to read, as usual, the set aside prayer. My name is Jill, and I'm a grateful alcoholic. And I'm also great for Amy BH, who is looking after all the graphics and is a regular speaker in here. We're kind of a tag team. We've been doing this together for, I don't know, 18 months or more than that now. And we're having a great time. So anyway, the set aside, for those of you who are new, you can write your own version of this. This is just the one my sponsor shared with me. If you go to the Bronx, you might have noticed a different one. The point of this prayer is that when you come into this room, set aside everything you think you know about, and then we're going to read it. So this is Sarah's version. But again, one of the things to do for homework is to write your own. Whenever you start to think you're getting complacent with the program, or whether you're worried about where you're at in the program, write one for yourself, or set aside anything else that you think is blocking you. Okay? So a moment of silence, please, for the still suffering alcoholic, in and outside of the rooms. And I'd like you to please read out loud with me. And it's on the screen, but for those of you who are listening to audio, it says, "Dear God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about myself, my disease, the big book, and the 12 steps. Everything I think I know about the program, the fellowship, all spiritual terms, and especially about you, God, or higher power, whatever your concept is. So I may have an open mind and a new experience with all of these. Please help me see the truth. Amen." So tonight we are on step 4. And if you turn in your big book to page 67, we're starting with the paragraph referring to our list again. So we're not going to get very far because there's some very important information about this step that is written in the 12 by 12. So I'm going to supplement a little bit of what's in here tonight with the 12 by 12. Before we get going, I just want to point out a few things. You're ready for step 4 as soon as you've taken step 3. And it says that right in the big book. So once you've admitted your powerlessness over alcohol or your addictive substance, and this isn't the and, remember, you've also acknowledged and owned that your life is unmanageable as a result of that alcohol or addiction, you've taken step 1. We've done step 2, and now we're ready to enter into the world of step 2. In step 3, in step 2, we said we came to believe that there was a power greater than ourselves and it could restore us to sanity. In step 3, we then made the decision to turn our will over to the lives of God as we understood him. And now we're at step 4, where we make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. The timing of step 4 is right after, it says in the big book, at once, after step 3. So now what you're ready to do is enter into 2 phases of this. One is when you're going to actually complete the readings that are appropriate in the big book, and then you're going to go through the method of your choice as laid out specifically in the big book, or there's some alternate forms and stuff that people use. But tonight, what I'm going to focus on is the asset column. Amy last week introduced some different ways of doing this according to different groups. The information is all the same. It's just laid out differently. But one thing that I think is super important is to understand that what we're doing is we're identifying the part of ourself that we want to let go. Any inventory that you take has got goods that are in store that no longer serve their purpose, or they're damaged, or they're causing problems. They're rotten. Imagine you own a grocery store. Those things have to be swept away to make room for new stock. And some of those things won't be past their sell-by date. Some of those things will actually be still serving your store well. So when you take your inventory of yourself, you're outlining the things you want to get rid of. And we call those our character defects. But there's a flip side of every character defect, and that's your character assets. And that's what I want you to focus on tonight. Now, if you're an alcoholic like me, one of the things I discovered when I was looking at where my resentments and all the things were that were wrong with me, a theme that kept coming up time and time again for me was self-esteem. Now, for you, it might be jealousy. It might be anger. There's a whole long list of character defects, and as you go through the process, you may even add more to the list than I've already got. Sarah and I've gone through and made a list of character defects, and I think we stopped at 100. So you can write your own. You know what it is. There's the 7 deadly sins for sure, and the big book is going to go through that. We're going to get to those in a moment. But right now, what I want you to think about is what is holding me back from, as we say, the sunlight of the spirit, or whatever your higher power is. What is holding me back from leading the life that I'm meant to live, sober? And so if you've got a lot of sobriety in terms of years, and you're still feeling that your brain is thinking like an alcoholic or an addict, say you're looping on something in particular, you can still go back and do a step 4, even though you've been many years sober. What you're doing is you're doing your inventory again. If you're new to this program and you've never done the steps, what this is taking inventory for the first time. So we actually are really careful with this process. It says we're painstaking. We don't just skip over stuff. At the same time, we don't let ourselves get freaked out about what we're going to look at, because we've all got some things we'd rather other people didn't know about. But the point is, how free do you want to be? You're going to be as sick as the secrets you keep. So the whole point behind what we're trying to do here is take a look at our stock in trade, the good stuff and the bad stuff. And anything, if we've got overwhelmingly more bad stuff, which, let's face it, when we come into these rooms, a lot of us, including myself, were in pretty bad shape. So when I finally did my inventory, there was a lot more on my bad list, and I was having a really hard time seeing the good stuff. But you also have others that have this delusional mind that there's no bad stuff in their inventory, that it's all good, because they have the character defect of, here's one for you, grandiosity, right? Where I only want to look at my good stuff, and hey, I'm not going to look too closely at my bad stuff. So a thumbs up if everybody's following me at this point. Great. It looks like everybody's with me. Okay. So Sherry, can you unmute, please, and read the paragraph on page 68 that starts referring to our list again?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let me just adjust my volume here. Okay. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, good.
Absolutely.
Okay. Referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight.
Okay, so wow, this is loaded. First of all, referring to our list. Okay, so what all we're doing here, you guys, is putting down, this is nothing to be terrified of. We're just making an inventory, right? So that's what they're saying, referring to our list again. And it says, put out of your mind the wrongs that others have done. Now that's really important because that's what we say when we're taking somebody else's inventory. I didn't understand that when I came in here. I thought, because some of the people I had resentments against were also alcoholics, and some of them were still drinking. Some of them were family members. Some of them were in the program. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the other person did. What we're cleaning up here is our side of the street. That's what we're identifying. And then what we're trying to do in that behavior, it's very simple. We're just saying to ourselves, okay, where would we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Those are some examples of character defects. Selfish is a huge one. Selfish has all sorts of other names that come with it. Jealousy, self-centeredness. Then there's dishonesty. So you get the basic ones there. Now, the whole point of looking at your assets, which we're coming up to, is what is the flip side of selfish? For me, I had to have a vision of generous Jill because I was so full of self-loathing. I found it really hard to look at this stuff. And my sponsor supported me and said very, very comfortingly, but Jill, that may have been you yesterday. Maybe you can be generous tomorrow. Maybe I was dishonest then, but I can be honest in all my affairs today. Maybe I was self-seeking then. Maybe I'm the opposite of that now, and I'm seeking for you. Maybe I was frightened before, but now I'm brave. The whole point is, what are my motives? Always ask yourself, what are my motives? How can I be the best Alicia, the best Alex, the best Laura, every one of your names in here? So when you're going through your character defects, this was Jill version 1.0, the alcoholic Jill. Now, also note that this could be Jill 20 years sober, still thinking like an alcoholic, not having done the steps or not having done the steps recently. And if my brain is going looping and I'm resentful and anger and bitter and jealous or whatever the character defect is that's going on, and my thinking starts to get alcoholic, I have to get back into Jill 2.0, the opposite of what that resentment is based on. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? It's replacing the bad with the good. And I have to have a vision of what Jill 2.0 is. Otherwise, I'm just sitting here making a list of a bunch of crap that's going on with me. And I get down and feel really bad about myself. But what a beautiful thing. Even if I'm 90% on the character defect side, and there's 10% of me maybe being a nice, generous person, I can now choose while I'm not drinking and while I'm not using to grow that 10%. So the character defect shrinks and the character asset grows. Voila, Jill 2.0. Does that make sense to everybody? We're letting go. Okay, so where were we to blame? I personally don't like that word. I like to more think of where was I responsible? You know, what's my role in this? And then it says here, the inventory was ours, not the other woman's or man's. Okay, so when I'm, or family member or whatever, that's how you need to, where am I to blame? Not where my sister is, you know, what's my role in this? Not my daughter's. And then I take a good look at what my role is and I list the faults in black and white. It says right there, we place them before us in black and white. It doesn't say just talk about it. This is part of the action. The writing part of this program is vital. And if you're not journaling and you're not answering questions with your sponsor and you're not doing homework and you're not doing this inventory, that's not action in black and white, is it? So I've learned in this program, I have to do what is strongly suggested, and the written part is very vital to this program. It says so several times, and I'm not going to bore you with all the different references to where it says it in the book, but it does say, write it down. And this is one of the sentences right here. It says, in black and white, we admitted our wrongs honestly. Circle the honestly, guys. There's no point deceiving yourself. Whatever you leave out at this point, you're going to ultimately go back and clean up later. But here's another thing about doing the fourth step. You got to finish it at some point. We're not all so bad that, I mean, we can do 200 pages of our character defects, depending on how thorough you want to be. But at some point, you get enough down. And the whole thing that we're doing is we're trying to figure out our character defects. We're trying to see the patterns in our behavior. And once I recognized I had low self-esteem, I had to learn how to do the opposite, how to reinforce it so I felt good about myself. Okay, so we've admitted our wrongs honestly, and now it says, notice, circle this word, we're willing to set these matters straight. This is step 4. Step 4 isn't frightening. Step 4 is about willingness. Nobody else ever has to see this list. Okay, all you're doing right here in black and white is putting down what your personal inventory is, your stock and trade, the not so good stuff and the good stuff. Okay, Sylvia, do you want to read the next paragraph, please? Start last paragraph on 67, starting, notice the word fear.
I sure can, Jill. Notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble.
Oh, I love this paragraph. I mean, because it's true. The fears, okay? What I highlighted in here was evil and corroding thread. It was an evil and corroding thread. And what does that mean? It's the opposite of good, but it's worse than the opposite of good. It's evil. This is like when Bill uses words like it's a grave situation. It's a fatal disease. He's saying these are going to be the things that bring us down. And that is why he says also here, the underlying fear, because underneath every one of these resentments, we're going to find there's a fear. And then it's okay. Because once I saw, I was afraid you weren't going to like me. I was making you my higher power. That was my self-esteem issue. And so I was overcompensating in all sorts of ways by appearing bigger than, or trying to be grand, or operating in ego. So once we understand these things, we can label the fears, we can look them straight in the eye, and we can let them go. And that is what this process is about. Let's get rid of the inventory. Let's get rid of the stuff that is no longer serving us. And let's go over to the character assets and work on that Jill 2.0. Am I talking in circles here? Can I see some nods if everybody is understanding me? Well, this is good. We seem to all be getting the drift here. Okay, let's see. Alex, would you like to read the paragraph? We reviewed our fears thoroughly.
Sure. My name's Alex. I'm an alcoholic. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. Perhaps there is a bit. Keep going.
Okay,
or,
just
no.
Alex, we just stop
Yep.
here. Okay, so what this, we put them on paper. Does everyone see that? We put them on paper. Okay, this is what was on 68. We put it on paper. Again, we're saying this is what we're going to do, is own it. And then it's saying self-reliance failed us. Highlight that. Self-reliance failed us. This is not a me program. And the we is actually going to involve my sponsor and my higher power. And in step 3, I admitted and met and owned my higher power. It's still a relationship that continues to grow. But this is a reminder right here of looking back, where every time I thought I knew better, I failed. Every time I relapsed in this program, I got back into myself. Every time I picked up the bottle again, every time I went back to using opiates not as prescribed, it was because I went back into self-will. I thought I knew better. And every time I ended up back on my knees, astounded and asking myself, how did I get here again? Does that sound familiar? And even if that occasion with the substance was a long time ago, I can go back there in my head. I can be a long time, have years of sobriety, and emotions can come up for me and situations can come up for me again that I have to go back and do an inventory on. When I start to feel irritable, discontent, and the big lover of relapse, resentful, I need to pause and say, what am I resentful? What's that all about? What is the underlying fear? And I need to pause and reflect and go through it with my sponsor and say, okay, and I do this. I actually do this. And my sponsees call me when they start to feel that that is, if they're using their toolkit, they call me, right? If they pick up the bottle, then it's a whole different conversation. But the point is, if we call our sponsors, if we call each other, if we if we figure out with another person and then we pray on it and say, okay, why am I so crazy? Where is this going? Pause, reflect, discuss it, go through it with another alcoholic that understands. Okay, so it says that some of us have great self-confidence. Some of us overcompensate. Some of us laugh about the things that we are secretly so ashamed of. Some of us make eloquent speeches and we get louder, but we relapse again. Grandiosity is a character default. So that's another character default at the opposite end of the extreme. You can have low self-esteem, or you can think, hey, I got this. You know, recently I had somebody, a sponsee, say to me, you're not going fast enough for me, and wanted to do step 4 right now. They hadn't done a thorough step 1 because they hadn't turned it over. And I started speeding things up. But if you haven't done step 1, you're at step 0. This thing is, our 1, 2, 3 was the foundation. Now we're looking at the stuff. We can't look at this stuff if we haven't done step 1, 2, or 3, because we'll relapse. Do you get it? You need a foundation. You need a higher power present in your life with your sponsor before you take this stuff on. And I didn't do it that way. I thought I'd been around the program for a long time. I'm going to start. I not only made inventory lists, I started making amends when I hadn't done the steps in between. And I made a right mess of it. But that's a story for later. Okay, let's get back to reading. Tessa, would you like to, we're on page 68, the paragraphs, perhaps there is a better way.
Thank you, Jill. Tessa, alcoholic. Perhaps there is a better way. We think so. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than finite selves. We are in the world to play the role He assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us, and humbly rely on Him. Does He enable us to match calamity with serenity? We never apologize.
So here's the, we're going to stop right there. So this is actually the basis for you to write your own step 4 prayer. Okay, so this paragraph, it says, perhaps there is a better way. We think so. AA doesn't say we've got the only way, but we do know that we've tried other ways, and this is where we've ended up, and it's working for me. So I'm one of the people that testifies, we think so. I think so. There is a better way, I know. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We did that when we went into step 3. You're not alone anymore. You can turn this stuff over. We trust infinite. What's the word infinite? Endless capacity. We trust a higher power that has endless capacity. And if you haven't got that relationship yet, do you believe I have one that has endless capacity? Well, I do. And there's room in it for you. So until you get your own version of it, you can borrow mine. Mine has endless, infinite capacity. We trust infinite, God, higher power, rather than our. So what's the opposite of infinite? Infinite, as I just said, is without end. Finite is limited. Finite has a starting point and a stopping point. That is me. Whenever I go and start acting in self-will, I'm ignoring my higher power and I'm actually pretending I'm God. Do you guys see that connection? So it says it right there. That's a very, very important sentence. We trust infinite God rather, so as opposed to our finite self. That sentence means get out of jail. get out of Sylvia, get out of Amy, get out of, you know, right? This is get out of yourself. Get out of version 1.0 and get into version 2.0. Can I have some nods if everyone is following me? Because sometimes I just feel like I'm talking to black squares. Okay. All right. So, and then it says, just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us and humbly rely on him, does he enable us to match calamity with serenity? In other words, as much as I get out of self is as much as I'm going to get rewarded. And what's the reward? Calamity is replaced by serenity. Just like a character default is replaced with an asset. The nonsense going on in my head, calamity. Calamity is a storm. Now, if you're an alcoholic like me, sometimes, as they say, I don't think so good. Or as other people will say, yeah, my best thinking got me into Alcoholics Anonymous, right? I'm a genius. Leaving myself to my own selfish will and my own ego. I'm so smart, I landed up right in here. And then I couldn't stay in here because I kept thinking I knew more than this book. That's exactly what this is saying. I'm the calamity. Until I get out of my own way, I let my higher power in and I stop fighting. I'm not going to know. And that you're going to circle the word serenity. That is your fourth step promise. Big P next to that. That's a promise. You're going to replace calamity with serenity. All right, Kim, do you want to take us on the paragraph, we never apologize?
Sure. I'm Kim. I'm an alcoholic. We never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. I'm sorry, this is just new to me. Okay. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. Wow. Okay.
Okay, that is one of the most loaded paragraphs in the book. Why? Because put two big stars, highlight the whole thing, first of all. And why is it so important? This is the essence of each prayer in AA. And what it is to replace calamity with serenity. What did we just talk about? The last three words. Circle those last three words. This is the essence of each prayer in AA. And then the following paragraph is, we're saying right here and there, there's no shame. I never apologize to anyone for depending upon my higher power. That's what the first sentence says. I don't have to go around telling everybody about it. You know, I've tried that. Oh, don't worry about it. I'm going to just ask my higher power. And then I've had some looks. If they're not in the program, they really do think you're certifiable. And then nowadays, we can laugh at those who think spirituality is a way of weakness. Well, what do you care? And probably no one's laughing because most of the time, nobody's really thinking about us. It's all in our head that everybody's thinking about us. Then there's a paradox. It is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. If you've got faith, if you have done step 3, then you're already armed, right? Have courage. You've been replaced. Look at it this way. Here's how I envision it. Imagine you are wearing a suit of armor. Okay, you've seen those in the old museums, right? And it's made of lead. You know how much lead weighs? Every single one of those pieces that are put together in the suit of iron weighs 50 pounds. And you are the person underneath that suit of armor. That was what I arrived like in AA. And when I found my higher power decided in this 4th step process, let's lift the lead off, and took away the character defects that were so heavy. And today I walk lightly. So here's the thing about this other sentence, though, is that we're asking him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he could have us be. Okay, this is a loaded sentence. Underline it with red, and I'm going to explain it. I'm asking my higher power. You see the H is capitalized, and you saw G was capitalized for God in that paragraph, and C was capitalized for creator. So in order for you to identify with this paragraph, you got to put the words in here that mean something for you. So if you want to call it universe, I mean, I'm always saying HP. Hey, HP, it's my higher power. Like, your God can be called anything. And for convenience, it's a God of your understanding. So wherever we see that word God, that's your God, right? So I'm asking my God in step 4, can you please remove the fear, because we've labeled it, right? That's underlying all these character defects. Please take them away. Here's the deal. Some of them might not be taken away right away. You don't get to choose which character defects get removed, because some of them you might not have learned all your lessons for. But the point I'm wanting you to focus on tonight is what I started off with. As soon as you've taken that piece of lead off, I want you to replace that piece of the armor with something helium-filled and light. Or if you want to visualize, you're replacing it with angel feathers. Because at the end of this process, we are going to have been transformed from somebody that was carrying and trudging along all this guilt and shame that was based in all the things that we did when we were drinking. It's not even really us. It's a version of us when we give in to our disease. But what we're aiming to do in here now is be rid of that thinking that underlies the disease. Even if you've been sober for a long time, you can recognize the thinking when it gets alcoholic or addictive. And it can manifest itself in other ways. Disordered eating, gambling, whatever. It rears its head in all sorts of different ways. And we treat it the same way we treated our alcoholism. But that's a whole other conversation. Anyway, that is where I'm going to conclude. I want you to really take that paragraph and read it through again in the first person and pay particular attention to that last sentence. You're going to outgrow your... And then we're going to wrap it up there, and you can see we're going to start on now about sex, and that's going to be Amy next week. Anyway, let's stop this recording, and I'd like to hear what your takeaways were from this.